delighted to say I'm now joined in the studio by the Iranian human rights campaigner Lily Mu, who believes that the government should launch a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal. Lily, welcome to the studio. Pleasure to have your company.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask you, as an Iranian woman, you have a special insight into perhaps the backdrop, the cultural backdrop that you believe exists in Britain that may be poisoning young Muslim boys to act in a despicable way towards white girls. Tell me more.
I was shocked to experience this personally. Growing up in Birmingham, I went to a school that was predominantly Muslim, and 92% of the population of that school were Muslim kids. And girls and boys, as wonderful as they were, boys were poisoned into sexualizing any girl who is not a Muslim girl, to the point that that they were like in the madrasa. A lot of the boys would go into a Friday school where the Imam would make it okay and even encourage them to assault teenage young white girls because they want it. That's why they come out looking like they do. And they should only protect and respect a Muslim woman or a Muslim girl who's fully covered up. Therefore, it's open season on all the white girls or any non-Muslim girl, to the point that we had nicknames like Gories for the white girls and Kalas for the black girls, to whoever wants to hit on someone or demean them or verbally assault. I was verbally assaulted by so many boys who had no idea what they were even talking about. And I'm a very confrontational person. If anybody would talk to me in a disrespectful manner, I would make sure they understand that they have done this, and I would shame them in that moment. Most girls don't have that ability. Most girls in schools, especially children, they don't know how to defend themselves against such language and behavior. And then they're being bullied into submission, and then eventually sort of a lay of the land is you bully the girls in schools into submission until they've been taken into the gangs.
It's incredible to hear this, and it will no doubt raise a lot of concern in the political class, in the police class, and people will be clutching their pearls across the land about this, because this is the secret that dare not speak its name. It's one thing, though, Lily, to learn that those coming from abroad into our country may hold those values, but it's quite another to learn that they may be being taught them within our country.
It's all
That's
being
an
taught
incredible
inside
claim.
of the UK. It's all being taught inside of the UK by madrasas, the Islamic schools for boys, and BBC has even done documentaries on these. They're all on YouTube. This is all public information. What shocks me, though, is that why is it that the victims and the survivors are being treated like they should not be believed? Who in their right mind would accept a child being sexually exploited and say that this child is making it up?
And yet that is happening.
It is happening,
and despite the fact that we have 12-year-old girls being gang raped, being given contraceptives by the police. We had a girl yesterday, Scarlett, who was 13 at the time. Her father used to go trying to find her across the town. She'd been force-fed drugs, force-fed alcohol, multiple men abused. He didn't even remember it, and yet not a single person has ever been committed for any of those atrocities. Why is it, do you think, Lily Mu, that the authorities are so terrified of the Muslim community and they just don't seem to have the guts to tackle it?
I believe the whole culture of victim blaming and pushing the sin of being a woman is an embedded cultural reality in the Muslim ideology, or at least not all practicing Muslims have this ideology and belief, of course, but the extremist politicized Islam that's fully embedded into the country now. I mean, we have 85 Sharia laws in this country. There is no need for a Sharia law. In a Sharia law, a rapist is basically is the victim of this story because he was tempted to sin against a young girl. Child marriage is allowed under Sharia law. What is happening to the UK when a white British girl is raped and killed and then they call that an honor killing? What is happening to the UK? I mean, if there is not going to be a national inquiry, what is going to happen? Because the politicians who are already in power right now, today, our Prime Minister, he was in power 10 years ago when he could have done something about it. And today he has the audacity to say he did something about it. Well, it's truly showing otherwise. There are victims who have no support. There are families who are ashamed of even speaking up about this. There are girls who don't believe this even happened to them because they are so afraid of the reality of accepting such horrors that they've endured. They want to believe they were in a relationship. It's appalling. It's heartbreaking. See, my brother was bullied in school because I come from Iran and we were not Muslims. After I left my high school, my face was cut out on a picture and put on a porn website. And the Muslim boys in school were passing this picture around to each other to the point that we had the police involved. All of this record is there. And they had my teenage brother's nose was broken and beaten because he wouldn't stand for such rudeness and foul behavior. Everywhere my sister and I were to go, living in the West Midlands at the time, was always with an escort so that we would not be preyed upon. It was not a safe place, and nobody wants to talk about that.
Well, thank you very much for coming in and sharing. This is incredible. I often find myself, just like lost for words. Lady Moo, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Coming up, God, I've got to stop doing this. It's not about me, I'm just sorry. I'm just so moved by all this. Now, coming up, data exclusively seen by GB News reveals that the pensioner vote for the Labour Party has collapsed. Now, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has said that the Tories will put forward an amendment to the Children's Wellbeing Bill to require a full national inquiry into the rape gang's grooming scandal. And meanwhile, Reform has said that if Labour do not hold a full public inquiry into the rape gangs before the end of the month, or at least commit to one, then Reform UK will say that they will appoint independent ex-judges and experts. Nigel Farage said earlier on today that he would pay for his own report. Well, loads to talk about there. And I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, this scandal now is gathering a huge amount of momentum, and it's forcing parties to take a position. Perhaps 14 years too late. The Conservatives are crying for a full inquiry. They're trying to force a vote through. Is it performative? Does it have any teeth?
The answer is yes and no. Yes, it is performative, and no, it has no teeth. So what happens tomorrow is the Tories have tabled an amendment to the Children's Wellbeing Bill at the second reading. That means it's a reasoned amendment. If voted through, which it won't be because the majority of Labour MPs are against it, it will sink the entire bill. The Children's Wellbeing Bill includes all sorts of things, including capping children's school uniform bills. So it's a well away from the very serious issues we're talking about here with child grooming and abuse mainly by Muslim men. So it's performative in the sense that Labour will have to require its MPs to vote against the amendment or abstain, and that means that whenever the next election is, you've got an opportunity here for the Tories to say, when we try to have a national inquiry into the grooming gas scandal, your Labour candidate didn't support it, either voted against or abstained. So there's lots of battles going on here in politics. We've also got Daisy Cooper, she's the deputy head of the Lib Dems. She wants Kemi Badenoch to fire Robert Jenrick for saying that the UK had imported hundreds of thousands of people from alien cultures who possess medieval attitudes towards women. So around all this sort of hot air, anger, fury, the issues, the concerns of the victims, so amazingly brought to our attention by Charlie, our colleague, and also yourself, Martin, on this show, is not being talked about.
It's astonishing, don't you think, though? I mean, OK, Robert Jenrick used some fruity language there. Alien cultures, medieval attitudes to women. But the Liberal Democrats saying you should be fired for that. Isn't this the point all the way along? If you dare to raise uncomfortable truths, you're stamped on, you're silenced, you should be cancelled and fired. This is the problem. But I hasten to add, this performative chest puffing by the Conservative Party, they declined a national inquiry in 2022. They had 14 years to do an inquiry. They've been forced into the open because of this reporting, because of Elon Musk, because of Charlie Peters. Is it too little, too late? And then moving on to Nigel Farage. He sees all this from the sidelines. He's saying he'd like to fund their own report. Is that a good idea? Would that be apolitical?
I think it'd be quite easily disregarded, I'm afraid, by critics of his, saying you're just trying to keep it going for your own political benefit. Number 10, for its part, say that a Farage inquiry is not justified. Their position this morning, and still stands, is that the Baroness J report, Alexis J report, out in 2022, that lasted 7 years, 18 strands, one of them including child sexual exploitation, 7,000 victims. It looked across the piece from churches, schools and the like. That was a full national inquiry, the J report. The time has passed for more inquiries, number 10 say. We don't need more research into the issue. We know what it is. Therefore, they will not do a full inquiry. Now, critics would say if you did a judge-led inquiry, that judge could look at the approach of the CPS when a certain man called Keir Starmer was in charge, and the police, and some would say, many on GB News's our platforms would say, there's been just 6 towns mentioned in the J report. There were sample towns. We have found 50 towns, as we know from yesterday, where there's been court evidence about grooming gangs. What are those gangs? What were those towns? Why are they not being talked about? The issue of being a far right to call for it, that was Keir Starmer in that press conference I was with him yesterday. Number 10 say today that no, it's not far right to call for an inquiry. We had it on the channel on your show yesterday. You had I think guests saying as much. They're saying it's only when politicians jump on it when it becomes far right. To which the question is, well, what is far right? Because calling for an inquiry isn't far right. Is it only when it's done by politicians? Is that far right? But they've clarified that newspapers calling for inquiry is not far right by them. So again, I go back to the original point you're making while I'm supporting you. The victims are being forgotten here as all these battles are fought about who's to blame. And the truth is the Tories didn't do anything about it for 14 years, and Labour are trying to implement the J review, 20 recommendations, only 4 of them have started work so far, 16 with no timescale to deliver them.
Meanwhile, when we talk to people like Sam, the 12-year-old that was raped, Charlie Peters earlier today, Marlon yesterday, whose 13-year-old daughter was raped, Scarlett. They all want a national inquiry, a transparent inquiry. The trouble is, they don't have any faith in any inquiry. They've been repeatedly failed by every agency in the land. Can I ask you another point? Do you think the Labour Party's got a far-right problem? They call everything far-right they disagree with. And it's severely annoying a lot of people. It's dividing society, and it's putting everybody, even people who've been raped, even fathers whose daughters have been kidnapped, into the same camp as their bogeymen, like Tommy Robinson. Somebody, I think, should have a word with them. Stop calling everything you don't like far-right. It's dividing society.
Were they here, Labour would definitely say they're not trying to call the victims of this.
But that's the way it came across yesterday. Maggie Oliver, the tireless campaigner, was disgusted.
They've clarified they were trying to talk about politicians, although people took it to assume anyone calling for an inquiry. Indeed, that's how many interpreted it this morning. They are trying to say, no, that's not the point. But the idea of going back to the recourse of saying far right, we saw it last August with those riots, which everyone condemned the riots after the 3 girls being killed in Southport. No one accepts as anywhere acceptable, and nor is remarks on social media. But to say you're concerned about immigration last August was apparently a far-right position to take, and that's what so annoyed our viewers and listeners. There's a habit here of this government, it looks like, going towards a far-right smear on people who arguably have legitimate concerns.
OK, Chris, thank you very much. I look forward to speaking to you again in the next hour.